Welcome back to another episode of A Consumer's Guide to Property Damage. Today we are with Tara Stone from Stone Claims here in Florida, and we're going to talk a little bit about when to hire a public adjuster, when to hire an appraiser, what that process looks like, and how you find them. So thank you, Tara, for being with us. We appreciate it.
I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you to get started.
So my name is Tara Stone. I have been doing insurance claims since the late 90s. I worked for the major carriers for 15 years. I went all over the country. I've lived in every state except 11 where I've worked.
Oh, you did the traveling claims?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow. Catastrophe claims. If there was a storm, there was a freeze, there was a major fire event, I was there. So I settled over 12,000 claims for the carriers over the course of my career. And then 2014, I shifted and started representing policyholders.
What made you want to make that shift?
There was a multitude of reasons. I saw the industry change as a whole. There is a book, From Good Hands to Boxing Gloves, that kind of describes this. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest anyone reads it. But it really talks about how the industry, instead of paying claims, they realized on a high level from marketing companies, and these slides have been brought up into the open market in Congress, and everyone's talked about it, that the longer that you hold a claim, a delay, deny, defend. So the longer they hold it, 80% of the people, they give up. They say,
Absolutely.
oh, well, what
Another
am I going to
great
do?
book too, by the way.
Yeah, they send someone out here, they say we're not covered. And I saw we went from paying for roofs to paying for half of the roof to just repairing the roof to, if we have to fix it, do just the slope and don't include the metals and the drip edge. And it became a industry that I didn't feel good about anymore. Right. So I said, okay, I have all these years of experience, I'm going to help policyholders, and that's what I've dedicated my life to. And we are now in 20 states across the country. We specialize in large commercial complex claims. Okay. Everyone has their widget. That's really what we do. And then we also specialize in appraisal work. And our appraisal division is also all over the country. And on that side, we do residential and commercial.
Tell us what that word appraisal means, because you've said it a couple of times, and I'm not sure everybody knows what that means in terms of insurance.
Right. When you hear appraisal, most people think about the appraised value of their home.
Right.
That they get that when they're ready for their financing.
They're buying.
Does the appraisal come in
Yeah.
right? From an insurance perspective, it goes back to the policy language. And most policies, not all, have alternative dispute resolution outlined. So the policy says if you disagree with the insurance company, what you can do to rectify that. And most policies have three options: mediation, litigation, or appraisal. So appraisal is an alternative dispute resolution where each party, the insurance company picks their appraiser, the insured picks their appraiser, they come together, and the two appraisers pick an umpire. If the two appraisers can't agree on an umpire, then you go to court and the judge appoints one for you. And then there's a hearing. They come out to the
umpire
house.
for?
Umpire, so it requires two of the three parties to agree, and that is final and binding.
Okay.
So the appraisal panel makes a decision about the valuation of the loss and assigns a dollar value to that claim, and then that is final and binding.
Okay. So essentially you have the two appraisers, and it sounds like if they don't agree, then that's when there needs to be an umpire, and
That's
he
correct.
kind of makes the final decision, it sounds
Exactly.
Or which one he's going to decide, which one he's going to side with, so to
Right.
speak.
The umpire
basically.
is in an appraisal process is almost like a god. They come in, they make the rules, they decide what dollar value, they're going to decide what coverage, and ultimately it can be a major decision on your claim.
Right. And I assume it sounds like this umpire should be completely impartial, correct?
Should
and
be.
I guess
Everyone in the appraisal panel should be impartial.
Okay,
And the
good.
policy actually specifies that you must have an impartial party.
Perfect, because I think, for consumers, it would be very easy to assume that, hey, if the insurance company chose this umpire or if I choose the umpire, how are they impartial to one side or the other? So I think it's important to state that it's an expected requirement that they be impartial.
Absolutely. And I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with the umpire because it gets a little
Right.
bit confusing if you're a homeowner just coming into the process. What's important to understand that appraisal is a method of dispute resolution.
Awesome.
Got
and
it.
we can
Okay.
talk about the specifics of how that works. But as a homeowner, you need to know that the policy says if you can go to appraisal and who can invoke it. Some
Awesome.
policies say that either party can invoke it. Some policies say that both parties must agree. And there's many times where the insurance company will invoke appraisal. And if they do, you are required to go through that process. And can you imagine if you're a homeowner and you get a letter in the mail that says we've invoked appraisal, and
You don't know what that
You start
means.
Googling appraiser, and then
Right.
you
Yeah.
get someone that's giving a valuation of the home to come out and try to advocate for you.
How do you find an appraiser? Say you were a homeowner and something like that happened. How would you go about even looking for somebody to appraise for you?
So that's where the connections with roofers and contractors are very important, because we would like to educate homeowners so that they're able to go through a detailed vetting process and finding an appraiser, but most likely they're not going to know, and they're going to Google it, and they're going to have a hard time because that word is used in so many other scenarios. So most of the time they find an appraiser through the roofing contractor, through their public adjuster, through an attorney, or through the internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. So we mentioned public adjuster, and I know that sometimes, homeowners hire public adjusters because we as roofing contractors, we're not PAs, right?
No.
They're public adjusters. So we can't talk policy, and we know that. So when homeowners have questions about their policy, or, they need somebody who can step in and advocate for them about with regards to their policy, we always recommend that they look into a public adjuster. But how would a homeowner go about choosing whether or not a public adjuster is the right way for them to go, or if appraisal is the right way for them to go? Is it based on what gets approved on the roof? Is it based on where they're at in the process? I mean, when would you know?
So it is case specific, and that's why I'm so excited that you guys are doing this education, because really understanding the nuances of them is so important. So appraisal is only if there is a dispute on valuation. And this is
But not
And-
scope?
so state specific.
Got it.
It is.
Okay, that's good.
It is like in Georgia, it's price only. It's valuation only. No, nothing, can
In
be
Florida,
added
we're
for
allowed
coverage.
causation. Mississippi, we're not. We work, like I said, as appraisers all across the country. So there's different mindsets and philosophies. And there are some states like Louisiana where it's not even binding. So you can go through the process and the insurance company can say no. However, even though it's not binding, it is very powerful.
Okay.
Because if it ever ended up in court and that came up that this was an appraised value, that would not be looked upon very favorably by a jury. So it does
Okay.
really help even in situations where you have a causation problem, or that it is a non-binding, to go through that process if you have the right appraiser.
Okay.
The
And a homeowner should
dangerous
probably,
thing-
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
so dangerous. It's final and binding. If it goes poorly, there's
You're
no
done.
appeal. You can't ask for a second inspection. You can't say, I wanted another appraiser. So going through the appraisal process, it's critical that you have the right person represent you.
Okay. And
That
there's,
sounds very important.
yeah, and there's different
it's scary
firms.
for a homeowner,
Very.
right? And
Well,
they don't
I think all
realize
of this
how
is
scary it
scary,
is.
right? And I think that there's been a lot of media that's come out that's made this even scarier, right? from a homeowner standpoint in the claim process, between various people committing fraud, whether it's on the contractor side or whether it's on the carrier side. And we're here to provide consumers as much information as we could, and also about vetting contractors, because it's important that they understand what they should be asking when they're hiring a roofing contractor and various other contractors that are going to be working from a claims standpoint on their home. When you choose a good roofing contractor, should your roofing contractor have those types of connections of who to recommend for appraisers? I mean, is that where you would go?
I believe
for
if
that?
you're a professional and honoring your job, that you should be able to provide resources to your clients in every aspect that they'd come into. Because I'm not a roofer, I can't put a roof on, but I certainly would like to recommend good qualified roofers to our clients. I'm not an attorney, but I'd like to recommend the best attorneys that I know that are going to deliver on the promise. And ultimately, we settle hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance claims every year. And if you as a roofer goes out and does a bad job to my client, I can't necessarily control what you do because you're a private
Right.
business, I'm a private business, we're not financially tied in any way. However, I do believe that there is leverage, because if you do a poor job for my client, I will never refer you
Right.
again.
Absolutely.
So instead of a contractor coming up to, a large high-rise condominium that they might do that work and not have work again for another 10 years, they have work coming from me as a referral source. So I do feel that I'm helping my client by providing the best roofers who understand there's value in these relationships.
I think it's also
Very
important for homeowners to know that there are resources out there. There are nonprofits like the American Policyholders Association, and there is an episode with Doug Quinn on the American Policyholders Association, but they have lists of, people that support that organization from a professional level, from roofers, appraisers, public adjusters. And if you literally have no idea where else to go, I'm sure that they could help connect you with those right people. Let's talk
There's
about
two organizations specifically as it relates to appraisals.
Awesome. Yeah.
The Windstorm Network was established over 26 years ago. It's Windstorm Network,
Okay.
and it is a certification program for appraisers and umpires.
Oh.
And the most beautiful thing is it is on both sides of the fence. So they have an annual conference where if you're in the industry, I highly recommend everyone go. It's
I
held,
feel like it was in Utah not that long ago, was it?
It was in Florida the last
Oh,
couple
the last
of
one
years.
was in Florida.
It's held typically in January, February, and they have panel discussions, and every discussion has a carrier representative, a policyholder representative, a defense counsel, adjusters from both sides, so that we can share ideas across the board. It also does certification for appraisals and umpires to make sure people are properly trained and understand the ethics of going through the process. So homeowners can always go to the Windstorm Network, Windstorm, and find
Is that wind, like W-I?
WIND. So it's Windstorm Network.
Okay.
Windstorm
Network.
Yes, and
Okay.
there's another one called IAUA, which is International, I believe, Appraisers and Underwriters Association, and that's another place that people can get certified.
Great.
Now, most states don't require a certification whatsoever to be an appraiser or an umpire. So as a public adjuster, I'm licensed to do business, I'm bonded in each state, but an appraiser just says that you need to be competent. So who defines competent in a space? And that begs to reason, can a roofer be an appraiser? And sometimes roofers are appraisers.
Absolutely.
But again, that's when we have to be careful about making sure that you're in your lane and you don't turn around and say, oh, I got a buddy, he works for another roofing company, he'll be your appraiser,
Right.
and not really understand the nuances of the policy details. In my experience, the best appraisers are people with insurance background and understanding, as well as construction, because to be able to articulate the policy nuances, even though you're not in many states going causation, the policy is the guide. It's really the basis of the contract. So you have to understand that contract in depth.
Got it. That makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
So let's go back to, when would a homeowner want to hire a public adjuster? Do they do that before going to appraisal? So how does that look? How do you know what decision to make?
So in the beginning of the claim, I would always recommend having an advocate. Like, you wouldn't go to court for a $100 traffic ticket typically without an attorney. So trying to navigate a $10,000, $100,000, $1 million claim without an advocate is a very difficult thing. There's resources out there, but there's not enough public adjusters in the world to help every homeowner with a roof claim. So that's where the roofing industry, being knowledgeable about only filing claims with damage and then having resources for your clients
If they get stuck, right?
If they get stuck.
Yeah.
So a lot of people want to give the insurance company the opportunity to do the right thing. And there's a benefit to that, but there's also a concern with that, because it's more difficult to turn a ship around when it's moving in the wrong direction. When it's already going in the wrong direction. Right? So I believe that it's always best to hire representation and having a public adjuster right involved from the beginning, because ultimately, if you do that, hopefully you won't end up in appraisal. It's alternative dispute, but if you don't get to the dispute, you never need the appraiser to begin with.
Okay.
But let's assume that either they didn't know about a public adjuster, they didn't want to hire a public adjuster, they couldn't find a public adjuster, and now we are in a dispute, and the insurance company has come out and they are saying that they're not going to pay for some of the damages, or that the contractor says the roof is $15,000 and the insurance company says the roof is $8,000, and there's a dispute in valuation. That's when appraisal is appropriate. If it's a straight denial, there is nothing to appraise. Correct. Because that is only a coverage decision. So in the case where it's a straight denial and the insurance company says we're not going to pay for your roof, at that point you need to choose to either hire a public adjuster to attempt to overcome that policy decision, or hire a licensed attorney to overcome that policy decision.
Awesome.
Okay.
That's fantastic information.
That is really good. So in kind of summary, the appraisal is an option for disputes, right? So when a dispute arises, it's specific to state as far as what can be determined in appraisal as far as resolution goes.
Correct, state specific.
And they would probably want to talk to an attorney in their state to find out.
An attorney or a public adjuster should know. That's really why Stone claims that we have our appraisal division, because since we don't represent residential policyholders unless it's a very large, complex claim, we wanted to have a way to help those policyholders, but yet there's only so much time in the day, so we have to make sure that we're delivering on our promise. And if they get into dispute resolutions, that we know that we can provide the best results. So in Florida, we're allowed to bring causation into it, and in Colorado, you're allowed to bring causation into it.
I think in Utah you are as well. I don't know about a lot of other states.
Because how can you put a value on something if you're arguing if it's damaged or not?
Right.
So, but there still has to be some triggering of coverage. If they don't pay you anything, it's a $0, and they said there's no coverage, then there's nothing to appraise. You're never going to get to appraisal. No. But if you go through the appraisal process, I can tell you, I did an appraisal down in South Florida where the insurance company had paid $272,000. And after going through the appraisal process, we got an award for $12.2 million.
Oh, wow.
And you look at these numbers and you say, how can this be? How can there be such a difference? Well, if the insurance company, in this case, had paid to replace one roof and then use the undamaged tiles to harvest the rest of the community, and paid very limited amount for exterior damages.
Right.
We came in as the appraiser and was able to bring in our experts and engineers and glazing consultants and weather meteorologists to prove that there was damage to the doors and the windows and the exterior coating, and that's how you become with such a difference. And the same thing happens every day on a residential appraisal, because now if you have the right appraiser and they come in, they're able to actually identify damages that might have been overlooked. A homeowner might not have realized they had interior damage. They might
Right.
not have realized that there was damage to their windows or their framing system. So that's why it's important, and we advocate in our state that causation must be included, because as a homeowner or even as a roofing contractor or many times a roofing salesperson, damages are overlooked if that's really not what you do and specialize in.
And, I think times too, not all the damages are immediately apparent, right? So there may be damage caused by the same event, and something may be, you might have shingles laying in the yard, right? So
can
that
see
there's an
those,
issue.
right.
You can see those.
Yeah.
But it might be that, you have water coming in your roof, and it may take 2 or 3 days before it filters through the attic and into your ceiling where you actually see it coming in. And I think oftentimes those little things like that might get overlooked because you're out there, as you said, you're looking at one thing that's extremely apparent, you can't miss it, and then there's other things that were essentially caused by the same event, but not so apparent for maybe.
Well, and most roofing contractors aren't going to go into the house and look at the cabinets or go into the house and look at the floor, right? We go into the attic. That's what we're supposed to do to check the decking, but we're not interior experts. And so I actually have experienced an appraisal with a homeowner where, the initial estimate that we gave for the roof was around $100,000 due to the type of substrate. And when it went to appraisal, it was settled at $260,000. And, unfortunately in that particular case, the carrier actually turned around and sued the homeowner for inflating the appraisal. And it was in litigation for 3 years. It was a tough situation all the way around. But the homeowner did end up long-term getting the value of the appraisal.
And you ultimately might end up with an attorney, a public adjuster, and an appraiser. Because
Very possible.
in most states, if the public adjuster is no longer considered impartial and not allowed to act as the appraiser.
So it kind of goes through this escalation type of a process or system. Yeah, makes sense.
But if you have it sounds to me like if you have a great public adjuster from early on in the claim, preferably the beginning, it sounds like, if you have that support, that person is really able to guide you through each of those steps should it ever get to that point where, it's much more escalated.
Absolutely. But even with that, as a homeowner, I think you should be doing your own due diligence, right? Because you want to make sure just because you are referred someone by a roofing contractor or an attorney that it's your house and your responsibility. So you should be interviewing those people, asking about their background, asking about their experience, about their expertise. Because if you're hiring someone that's new and just trying it out, you have the right to know that.
I would agree with that. And it goes that way with roofing contractors too, right?
Like that's where I was going to
say. And it is important to be educated. It is important to not rely on Google reviews. It's important to not rely just on word of mouth, but to combine everything all together and ask the right questions about experience. And, do you have references or referrals or somebody that we could talk to? And I think that that's important. I think as a country, we are less inclined to do research and go straight to, what's the Google reviews.
And ironically, more of it is available than ever before in our lifetimes, and people are less.
Well, and it's become inauthentic, to be honest with you. I had a gentleman call me as a roofing contractor. Obviously, that's my primary job a few months ago, and offer to sell me 500 five-star Google reviews.
Really?
And I lost
got one
it.
Yesterday.
I literally lost it.
I work so hard for every single one.
So do we. And that's
Right?
what I was so mad about. It's like I was so angry, and he couldn't even figure out why I was so angry. But because that's just, you shouldn't be able to do that.
To do it, and you should be working
Absolutely.
a whole case before you're able to get that review.
And you should be working to have that type of service, and knowing that people can buy them, unfortunately, makes them not as reliable. And so doing other checks and, following up and talking to real people about their experience, I think that's the best that we can do as consumers.
And from a contractor's perspective, anyone that has nothing to hide is more than willing to give you references.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
have reference sheets. I have customers that have signed agreements with us that said, by all means, I'm willing to talk to somebody should someone want to call
Yeah.
me. Give them my name, give them my phone number. And, if a contractor can't provide those,
Or
and,
a public
you may say the
adjuster
same thing
or
about
an
a PA,
appraiser. Yeah.
about a
Oh,
public adjuster.
absolutely.
If the contractor can't, if a PA can't, or if they won't,
Right.
there's a reason
Yeah.
that they're probably not doing that.
No, for sure. Just ask your questions, guys. Make sure that you know who you're hiring. You have the right to have that information. You have the right to understand.
Absolutely.
And it is your job because it's your home. So I think that's really important. All right. Well, Tara, thank you for being with us today. We
You're
really
welcome
appreciate
so
that.
much,
Thanks
Tara.
for contributing to educating consumers all over the country. We like to say that, we aren't doing this pro contractor. We're not doing this anti-insurance or pro insurance. We're doing it pro consumer because we're all consumers.
Everyone's a consumer.
And once in your life, you're going to most likely go through an insurance claim. So what do you do and who helps you?
Absolutely. Thank you
Thanks
so
again.
much for
We
sharing
appreciate
that
it.
with us.